I'd like to call to order the September 25th, 2012 regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education. Sandy, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belville. Here. Benford. Here. Fuqua.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind everyone tonight that the vision of the Boulder Valley School District is to graduate students in the new century who have the knowledge, skills, and personal characteristics that will make this world a safer, more thoughtful, and more inclusive place in which to live. I'll start with our first agenda item, the superintendent's report. Dr. Messenger.
Good evening, President Reed, members of the board. I have a few items I would like to bring to your attention this evening as a part of my report. On a really positive note, this Thursday evening, one of our own leaders will be recognized by Colorado Youth for a Change. Dr. Deirdre Pilch will be recognized as the 2012 Innovation in Education Award recipient. So a number of members of our staff will be joining her for that celebration. And you'd be welcome to come if your schedules allow. Work back through Sandy. This is a nice recognition and well-deserved for Deirdre's leadership in the area of our graduation rate success, dropout recovery, and student retention. So a lot of good work over the years with Colorado Youth for a Change and also our schools. So well-deserved recognition. So I just want to announce that. So. Okay. And we'll soon have additional good news to report on that front once it's official. So this will be consistent with the celebration. A couple of other things is just last week we had a celebration in our community, which Lori Albright represented us, with a recognition for Scott Carpenter, who obviously is famous in our country and our community. A park named in his recognition, a real nice celebration of his accomplishments and also our impact on our community. We were well represented not only by the Board of Education, but members of our students, our student body, members of our faculty, and a big celebration and got nice media coverage. So, Lori, thank you for representing us there, and hats off to a huge accomplishment by Commander Carpenter. Next Monday, I will be representing the district for a dedication of the new solar panels at Foothill Elementary. Dr. Carroll will join me for that celebration. As you know, this is one of our 14 projects that we have going on in the school district to take advantage of our sun in Colorado and to help generate energy for our schools. And so watch for that. And again, if you would like to attend that celebration or just get a chance to see the panels in any one of the locations, just work back through Sandy. We'd be glad to make those arrangements. As I did last year, I've had the opportunity to join one of the three county commissioners. Each one, they kind of rotate this responsibility for celebrations at the school around the Green Star Schools recognition. These are students that have completed 5 years in their work with EcoCycle and recycling and composting. And so when they hit that 5-year mark, we have a celebration, and just had one this afternoon at Eisenhower School, last week at Columbine. So it's really a nice messaging to reinforce the work of our students and faculty, because it's obviously a joint adventure to be proactive in recycling and composting in our schools. So those have been great celebrations and a nice partnership with EcoCycle, the city and the county. We've been making some outreach to legislative contacts. We're anticipating our breakfast with local legislators coming up in late November, early December, and obviously preparing for the session. I know that'll be addressed later in the agenda with our work with CASB. Last week I had a chance to attend the CASE, Colorado Association of School Executives, fall conference for superintendents and also Denver area superintendents. We have a sub-meeting within that. Very productive meeting down in Colorado Springs. Two major topics of conversation are the issues around implementing Senate Bill 191, the work that's going on in districts, well, at the state level with the pilots and the work that's taking place there, and also districts sharing their experiences and sort of where we are overall with that. So good dialogue, and then a lot of attention and conversation around what we anticipate might happen around school funding in the upcoming session, not just the legislative allocation, but might there be legislation introduced to rework the school funding formula. So a lot of anticipation and speculation of where that might go, and a lot of interest. So we'll all be tuning into that, I know. I also just wanted to note that this last Saturday, 9 members of our district team, teachers, administrators, building administrators, and district administrators attended the Peer Assistance Review Conference in Denver, along with about a dozen other school districts, to kind of ask the question, where might this fit into our work around Senate Bill 191 and our planning for that. So a chance to hear both the national model and also, like I said, a dozen districts were there. Jeffco and Denver Public Schools presented formally to the group about work they've been doing around peer assistance, but also their overall evaluation plan. Both have received significant federal and private money to do some development of their evaluation systems in recent years. So some lessons learned from obviously much larger districts, but certainly I think we left with some ideas of things that might work in part, at least here in Boulder Valley. So overall, a productive day for the most part, because we had a chance to work with our team a little bit. And we have a session of our work group this Thursday, I believe, with Senate Bill 191. So Jenny and Shelley, I think you are our reps from the board on that. So we're sort of just getting started with this work, but it's important work. So I think that is the extent of my report, President Reed, but I'd be also glad to answer any questions now or later. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Messenger.
Well, I have a question. So
Okay.
where's the reception for Deirdre?
It is at Comedy Works in
It's
Greenwood Village, at Comedy Works in Greenwood Village on Thursday evening.
Yeah.
Ellen will send you the link, and I'll pass the
thank you very
card
much.
down the table.
Great,
so you
great,
can take
great.
a look, okay?
Thanks. Okay.
I'm sure we can get you registered if you'd like to go.
Thank you. Then our next agenda item is student communications, and I believe they're still getting rolling for the year. So we can move to our next item, public hearing and public participation. Sandy, we have no speakers signed up, so we can move right into board communication then. Board members. Leslie.
Well, I just want to congratulate Deirdre. She has shown her passion for each and every student, so this is a well-deserved honor. Congratulations.
Jenny?
So Lori Albright and I attended the CASB regional meeting here for Denver Region 5 last night. And we've discussed some of this in our earlier work session, but I thought I'd sort of relate to the board some of the things that we heard at the session. And at the risk of repeating some of the things Bruce has said, you'll have to forgive me if I do. One of the things that they wanted us to be aware of is that this legislative session is going to have an unusually large freshman class of inexperienced legislators. So that's just something to be aware of. And the other thing that we need to be aware of is that there are now also a lot of players in the education arena, in the education reform arena, who aren't elected officials and who don't necessarily think that school boards are relevant. So we've been urged as board members to make sure to reach out to our legislators. And CASB does have a place on their website where you can click to find out who's running in your legislative district. If you'd like to reach out now before the elections and make those connections with people who may be representing us in the legislature. And I've talked to a couple of mine. I actually did have coffee with one of the candidates running, and I know the other one. So I think it's a good thing to do, and it's a way to introduce yourself so that legislators who may or may not know anything about public education will think of us as potential experts when they get to the legislature and have to vote on that kind of stuff. So some of the things that are coming up, as Bruce mentioned, is the new school finance bill. One of my concerns is that there's a lot of conversation that one of our legislators is very interested in introducing legislation that would require the money to follow the student to the school rather than going to the school districts. And I'm not sure where that is, but I'm a little concerned about that. So that's just something to be aware of. And then there's some talk about, and I think we're going to talk at an upcoming board meeting about how we feel about tying teacher licensure to the educator effectiveness rules. And we may have a little extra new money. I mean, I'm sort of hearing that there may be a little extra money next year. I don't know for sure, but that could be good. And some of this, of course, depends on whether the Republicans take the legislature or the Democrats. I mean, if the Republicans take it, there'll probably be some conversations about vouchers. If the Democrats take it, there's a possibility that the legislature will take on the Lobato issues, but I'm not counting on it. And then, let's see. And then I'd like to talk about one of the outside groups that's sort of a player down at the legislature and is influencing the state legislature is School Finance Partners, which has come up with a whole set of recommendations, which I have. It was a committee that met last year with a number of people, including Senator Mike Johnson and Tom Massey were sort of ostensibly members, and CASB and CASE had representatives, and the Donald K. Foundation and people like that. CEA attended. So they came up with some of these principles. And so they're the kind of group that may, and one of the things I noticed was although the CASB had, I attended some of these meetings as an observer, CASB had a representative on this committee, but really, nobody really thought that school boards, I mean, they just weren't really part of the whole equation. So that's another reason for us to stay involved as a school board if we think we're relevant and important, which I'd like to think I am. I've spent a lot of time at this. So School Finance Partners, if anybody is interested, is meeting on October the 2nd at the Capitol again to talk about some of their recommendations and where their place is going forward. And I'd be happy to send that information if anybody's interested. I know sometimes you are, Shelley. Let's see. I'm looking forward to working with Shelley and with the staff and teachers on educator effectiveness. And I'd like to thank the teachers at Creekside Elementary and Angel Stoba, who allowed me to visit school last week and watch and sort of learn about literacy kind of up close and personal. It was very interesting. And it made me think about, so this is just an observation I have about teacher effectiveness, which is that teachers are important, but so are the practices and resources that teachers have. So that I'd like to think that, I mean, a district can make a difference in how effective the teachers in the classroom are, and I'd like to think that we're implementing practices that will make many of our teachers more effective and that we're providing them with the resources they need to be effective. And if you don't have those system-wide practices and those system-wide resources available, it's very hard, even for very talented people, to be effective all the time. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Well, Jenny, thanks. That was a great report on what CASB's doing. It was a really interesting discussion about, some about politics and some about education policy. And it's just important that those of us who know what it means in the schools have some opportunity for impact when legislators are passing laws. So that's the reason that we're urging people to participate. It was really fun for me. Thanks for mentioning, Bruce, about the Scott Carpenter Park rededication. It was just really an absolute honor to be there with this man who's 87 years old, who was the second American to orbit the Earth. And he was real proud to be back in Boulder. He talked about that park and how neat it was to see that there were kids up there on the hillside rolling down the hill and playing Frisbee and bikes. And he said it's just really fun to see what's happened in that park 50 years later. But he's one of our graduates. He graduated from Boulder High, attended Uni Hill, and I believe Baseline, as I don't know what, it must have been junior high, I guess. And then Aurora 7 was named in his honor because he used to live on the corner of Aurora and 7th. So he feels real strongly about Boulder Valley Schools. And when asked, one of the questions was, what would you advise a young person today who might want to follow in your footsteps? He said, go to school and get good grades. So he was just real positive about schools and education and how important it is. And I mean, it just was a real important reflection for me to be able to listen to this man who is so incredibly accomplished as both an astronaut and an aquanaut. This time he spent in underwater in the ocean. It was very fun. I was real glad to be able to represent us there. So, it was fun. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Lori. Our next item of business would be an information item on the heat mitigation action plan. Dr. Messenger?
Don Orr will make his way to the podium, Assistant Superintendent for Operations. Don did a pretty extensive write-up that was in your packet, so hopefully you had a chance to take a glance at that. And I think Don's intent tonight is to just touch on a few of the high points with that report and also be glad to answer any questions. I just want to compliment the good work that Don and his team did. As you recall, last fall, we had some pretty intense conversations with our public about the conditions in the school, and ultimately, we left the calendar as it was planned, but the commitment was to do some work around heat mitigation. I think we had good success with that, and also we had some cooperation with the weather. So one of those we had more control over than the other, obviously, but all in all, it helped us have a much smoother start to the year. So Don, if you would.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll be brief tonight. I tried to provide a write-up that summarized our actions going into this year. Our intent was to try to be as well prepared as we could, so we didn't repeat the classroom conditions that we experienced last year. And that really was a two-pronged approach. Primarily, we wanted to make sure our purge system, that was our major focus of our efforts, was working optimally. And a fair amount of maintenance went into that effort. We employed some temporary employees that went in and did a fairly comprehensive cleaning of our systems, coils. It changed the filters. And that, coupled with our building automation specialists who really tried to troubleshoot our system, look at areas that had given us problems in the past. So at least we were comfortable knowing that the systems were operating as they should. And I think two things Bruce mentioned, the weather cooperated a little bit better this year than last year. Our highs and lows were lower, certainly this year than last year. And we didn't have any bond construction work that compromised some of our systems. So I think the efforts of the maintenance, ensuring that the systems ran as designed, coupled with those other two factors, put us in a much more proactive position, and our classroom temperatures reflected that, certainly lower than they were last year. The second part of our effort involved reducing the plug loads, and that is really what's plugged into a classroom. And we came in and asked teachers for those appliances and devices that generate heat, if they're not in use, turn them off. If they're not going to be in use for a long period of time, unplug them. And I think we've been successful with that. We're going to couple that with coming forward later this year with a policy, I mentioned it the last time I was here, that gives us a little bit more clout in what we allow for personal devices in a classroom. We've got a tremendous amount of personal appliances, coffee makers, refrigerators, heaters, coolers, all in the classroom that increase our plug load and cost us money to operate too. And so consistent with our sustainability management plan, we're trying to first go with the honor system and asking for voluntary compliance, and then follow that up. We'll monitor that and see how successful we are, and then perhaps come back with some kind of language that the board could discuss that would give us a little bit more clout on some of these devices and the proliferation of the devices in. We did work with our communications department, thanks Briggs, and got the word out at the beginning of the school year on what to expect. That was, I guess it went to 3 target audiences: staff, students, and parents, and gave them some suggestions on how to keep cool. And it's an ongoing process for us. We'll continue to monitor. We are still engaged in tinting windows. That was one of the options that was identified with our design team that was affordable for us, our south and west facing windows. We've got 20 schools that we've identified that are all at the elementary level, all non-air conditioned. And we'll be complete with that later on this fall. We're about a third of the way through right now. So I think those efforts all combined gave us good results. I'd like to take all the credit, but I think the weather had most of it to do with the lower temperatures. Our nighttime lows were really key, where we were able to really flush the buildings of the current air and bring in lower ambient nighttime air temperatures. And that's really our most effective strategy, short of full-blown air conditioning across the board. So I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Questions? Shelley?
I want to thank you for that very nice summary that you gave us in the board package. I felt like after I read it, I pretty much understood what you were going to say tonight, and it was very helpful, so thanks.
Great, you're welcome.
Tom?
So Don, last year, we really kind of had a perfect storm in the sense that the temperatures were hotter with construction going on, and then we found out the systems weren't working as well as we thought they were working. So I think you ought to give yourself a little bit more credit in getting the efficiency of these systems up and pulling in the nighttime air. But I think the comment is pretty insightful that the lower temperatures, and it's 3 to 4 degrees, 5 degrees difference in average temperatures, it had such a large effect. And I think as we go forward in the calendar planning, that's the difference between late August and early June. Early June statistically is about 4 to 5 degrees cooler, highs and lows, average highs and lows, than late August. So that's an important data point to remember as we go forward, that it could have a fairly significant impact on temperatures of schools if we do make a calendar change in that direction.
I agree. We try to hold on until Labor Day, and we know things will get better. Evening lows better after Labor Day. We benefited from that prior to Labor Day this year.
Yeah, thanks.
Sam?
Thanks for the work. Just your end note to the report says the majority of the complaints operations get is for air-conditioned rooms, like 80%.
Right.
Is that like the room is too cold, or what are the nature of those complaints?
It's either too cold. It's all kinds of different reasons. It's not operating. That's primarily the biggest one. It's not functioning as it should. A lot of those are control issues, minor, that our building automation specialist, I got to say, has made a huge impact in implementing programming changes to address that. But yeah, that's not a one-year snapshot. We've monitored these work orders over a period of time, and boy, for as long as I can remember, the air-conditioned buildings receive the most complaints. So I don't know if the occupants become accustomed to a certain temperature that's guaranteed, and our ability isn't. We can't guarantee it. I mean, we've got aging systems, et cetera, but that's where the complaints originate from. Yeah. Or the ones that are in non-air conditioned are just a little tougher than the ones that I don't know. Speculating, yeah.
Thanks, Don. It was a great report and great work in terms of being proactive about this and making sure everything worked. Thank you very much. Last year, I didn't count how many emails we got, but there must have been hundreds. I don't know, 100, 200, 300. I didn't get any this year, so I think you've done a great job.
Great, I'll pass that on to the.
As one measure
staff.
of, that at least the public was not upset. And I agree with you, that part of it was about the weather wasn't so bad, but it was also that we, I think your office demonstrated that we took it real seriously, worked hard at it, and people saw us doing that, and I think it made a huge difference. And it's important, in terms of credibility. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, Don, so to sum up, I guess, it is great work, but I would also think that, for the investment that the board made and that the community made in these mitigation efforts that you led, I would wonder and hope that you would bring forward any future ones as you see fit when we're in the budgeting discussion, because it does have an impact on the classrooms, and we can see what a positive impact this had for a seemingly small investment. So thank you again, and really an invite to continue letting us know how we can invest wisely.
Well, I will mention that, we're going through the assessment phase right now and collecting data on our building systems. And I've instructed our staff to look beyond, really to look at longer out into the horizon, maybe perhaps 2020 to 2025, and try to estimate usable life left in a lot of our systems. And it seems like we always play catch-up. The cap reserve budget certainly isn't adequate to do comprehensive replacement of our systems. So we're almost dependent upon the willingness of the taxpayers to increase taxes and fund a bond. But as we note our deficiencies, we wanted to try as best we can to get as proactive as possible and ahead of the curve, and really look at these systems and the extended life and put a date on it. And, had we done this in 2006, we would still have a reserve of money, and I could be coming back in, and as these systems fail, come back in and replace them. That's one thing we're doing. We're also looking at evaluating the community's value, if you will, on air conditioning. That'll be a topic of discussion. We'll have cost estimates, if we wanted to go in that direction, of what it would cost this district to not only install but to operate over time. And as we share our information with the community relative to what our facility needs are, I can guarantee you that that'll be a hot topic that a lot of people will weigh in on. Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
So our next item is our action items consent grouping, which tonight includes personnel items, the approval of minutes September 11th regular meeting, September 13th special meeting, and September 18th special meeting, acceptance of donation transportation, Early Childhood Colorado Preschool Program contract for 2012-13 school year, and Mental Health Partners MOU. I need a motion. Shelley, seconded by Jenny. Does anyone want to pull any items? Any comments or questions on any items? Shelley?
I have a question about the mental health partner MOU. And I think I emailed you today, Bruce, I don't know if you got it, but just a question about whether we do any program evaluations on how MHP is doing in those schools.
So I did receive your email, Shelley, and I just, actually I forwarded it to Dr. Pilch before the meeting as we stepped into the session. So Deirdre, would you mind coming up to the podium, and I think you can respond to Shelley's question.
Good evening. BVSD does not do a formal evaluation of the either day treatment program. However, we do an annual meeting with each of the partners that you see named in the MOU, and each of the day treatment programs are a licensed, registered with the state of Colorado date treatment program. So they're evaluated through that system, which requires us to report data on an annual basis to the state of Colorado.
Can we get a copy of that evaluation?
I don't know. It's data reporting, so I'll sure pull whatever we have to share with you.
Just a summary of their findings?
Sure.
And also, do you ever talk to the parents about how they feel the program's going in those schools?
I have not, but the staff at the schools do all the time. The 6 therapists that you see who are hired at Halcyon are working very closely with the families. So those therapists are not just working with the 34 students at Halcyon, but they're also working with their families as well.
I just think it would be interesting to do some sort of survey to see whether they're meeting the needs of the families. Is that something that could be accomplished? I mean, it's a pretty small group of kids in those schools.
Yeah, and the population of students changes over time, so it's not the same kids. So we would just need to pick a time of year when we wanted to do that and do that.
They're just some kind of survey monkey thing or something, just to see. Because, you know, there's a lot goes on in those schools, of course, and with that kind of treatment, and it'd just be nice to know how it's going, so, from the parents' perspective. So you think that would be possible to do?
Yeah, I think what I would suggest is that we reach out to the school and also visit with the partners involved in the process, because as what is obvious is they're not our employees, and so we have a contract. But part of the quality evaluation, collecting data from perception data from, families or students impacted, certainly we could visit with the agencies about how we might do that, just as we would if we were the employer. So it's a contracted service.
Don't we still do, I mean, do those parents not get the
Yeah.
parent satisfaction surveys
Yes.
that
Yeah.
we send to all
Well,
teachers?
Jonathan was just whispering in my ear, yes, that any parent who has a student at Sanchez or at Halcyon would receive that parent satisfaction survey.
So that'd be a place to start, for sure, to see if there are comments there or feedback.
We'll pull that data for you first.
And we would know, like, Halcyon's all those students, but at Sanchez, it's some students in the program
Right.
and some not, right?
Right, we wouldn't
So
know.
would we know which parents were who in that survey?
No.
No, and then only if they commented directly to the service, probably. All right. Thanks, Deirdre.
Any other comments or questions? If not, Sandy, will you call the vote?
Albright?
Yes?
Belleville?
Yes.
Benford?
Yes?
Fugler? Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Our cruising right through. Our next study item is the dedication agreement for Erie's Flatiron Meadows subdivision. Dr. Messenger?
I think Glenn's ready to, again, a nice write-up in your packet today. This has been sort of incubating for some time, which you have more history on this than I do, I'm sure. Met with Glenn and Don last week. They briefed me on where we are in the process, and so this is a study item listed for tonight. We bring it back in 2 weeks for your action. So I asked Glenn to do an overview, and then I know he'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have. Glenn?
Glenn Segru, District Planner. So we started back in 2001, actually, with the town of Erie signing an IGA with them, which required developers to either dedicate land to the school district or give us cash in lieu funds. At that time, there was a lot of development on paper, and there are actually quite a few underway that have since been completed in the town of Erie. So we saw a lot of potential for growth in that area and a need for school sites. About that time, about a year later, Meadow Sweet Farm was a concept plan at the time, which is a very, very preliminary development plan. We started discussions back in '02 with them about putting a school site in that subdivision. It was a very large subdivision, had a lot of room to accommodate a school site, and it was well located in the middle of that development to do that. So those discussions began in '02. And probably by '04, '05, we had a school site, but we didn't really have a development. I think since that time, that development's changed. I think it's gone through about 3 developers. For one reason or another, that part of Erie, there was much more development further to the east in St. Vrain, but that part of Erie seemed to stall out development-wise. More recently, though, Bayou Development Corporation has managed to, they're the most recent owner and developer, and they've pushed forward pretty solidly the last few years. They've gotten to accomplished one final plat, and when they hit the final plat, that triggers the time when they need to start dedicating us our school site. So now our school site is included in Filing 2. Filing 2 is currently under review with the city of Erie, or the town of Erie, and they hope to have that approved later this year. When that is approved, we are supposed to receive the school site from the developer at that time. So we could get the school site later this year or early next year. So this is fee simple, it's our land, this isn't a contract agreement, that will have to be pursued later. This will be our land, and we'll be able to move quickly when time comes that we do need a school. The dedication agreement part, that's just kind of like a sales contract. It lays out what the responsibilities of each party are in this. A lot of it is actually already in the IGA with Erie, so the developer is required to do this, but it is very beneficial to have them sign something that they're aware that they're not going to transfer responsibilities such as street improvements, infrastructure improvements, things like that onto the school district for our site, and have it prepped and ready to go so we can use it. So that agreement makes that all clear. They did not make many changes to our standard agreement, so we really feel what they've signed in this packet is in the interest of the school district, and staff supports it. So that's the dedication agreement part. I think when you talk school sites, schools always come up as well, and when they're going to be built. A few numbers, we are going to be doing some demographic reviews later this year, kind of comprehensively district-wide, It is always important to do a comprehensive review for school capacity, seeing where we have availability, where we don't, before looking into new facilities specifically like this. But that will be going on later this year. But we do have 300 students at the elementary level already in the Erie subdivisions. We expect Flatiron Meadows at build-out, which could be 5 to 10 years from now, to add about another 182 elementary students. And then the remaining development, we've calculated, have about 400 additional students, but some of that could come more recently, but most of that's further off into the distance. So there is tremendous development potential in Erie. Timing's an issue with the markets. The housing market seems to be heating up a little bit. We saw quite a number of permits this year being pulled, more than we've seen in quite a number of years, but we'll see how that holds. So we'll be looking at and seeing what kind of timing issues we have with that agreement. But for now, we just hope to get the land and keep planning from there. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Glenn. Questions? Leslie?
I have two. First of all, I recall, and it might have been Patty and Jean and myself, driving around with Dr. Garcia and Don, and we looked at some land sites that we had, and is there another plot of land somewhere out Lafayette, Erie, that we have or had?
There's a Domenico property, which is with Lafayette, the city of Lafayette. It's north of Baseline. It's a little bit closer to Lafayette Elementary than this one. This property is more central to the Erie properties that we're going to be seeing. That one we do not own. That one is part of an annexation agreement with the town. So the developer, when they annexed to the town, agreed that they would set aside some land. But we still need to go through quite a number of steps to acquire that land if and when the time we need it. We've been in negotiations with the town or with the city of Lafayette, and I think our interest in that would likely expire in about 2016.
So that's the only piece of property
That's the only other one that we, would have a potential to serve this area.
And then I know in times past, we've had a lot of out-of-district, so students coming from St. Vrain into our schools, especially when there was overcrowding. I don't know, will that be part of the comprehensive review, is looking, of course, it's hard to predict when students will come into our district or not, but.
Yeah. Right now, we get about 50 elementary students that are just immediately in the neighborhoods right across the border from what we can tell that come over. And they go to a variety of schools. They don't, most of the 300 I was saying, about 2/3 of those go to the neighborhood school, which is Lafayette Elementary. The out-of-district, it's not so focused. They're kind of going to lots of different programs through our district. And it's about 50 then. Of course, out-of-district are based on availability. So if there is crowding, then, accommodating them will be based on if there's availability for them.
Okay, great, thank you.
Have you seen a preliminary plat of the subdivision?
Well, we have technically 3 filings in. And those are final plats. So those
Okay.
are actual platted lots. So filing 1 and 3, which are basically the first filing, are about 71 units. And I think in my packet, they said they had 68 more in filing 2. Actually, they just updated that to 117. So they have 185 lots. My understanding is these have been purchased from Meritage, so Meritage is ready to build and go. And probably, in the current market, an absorption of maybe like 25, 35 units a year.
And so the school site, is there good access in and out with the current plat? I mean, does that look acceptable?
Yeah, there are 2. It's along one of the main roads that goes through the community and also has some side roads and has frontage on 2 sides. So it's very good access for
Okay,
for an
good.
elementary.
Now, what would be your projection, should things stay the way that they're going, as to when we would need to build out on this site?
When we would need it. That's really something I'll have to defer to the bigger kind of comprehensive review that we plan to be doing later in the year.
Okay.
When you're talking about one side like this, it's very important to look at it comprehensively and look at where else, what our other options are before you move too fast. But we do know it's going to be needed, and we can see that in the development potential in the area.
I'll wait till then. Okay.
Questions, Jenny?
So it looks like there's more, and maybe, again, you're gonna defer me to the comprehensive review we do, but by my count, we don't have any, this is like 700 or 800 kids, and we don't have any elementary schools in our district that have 700 or 800 kids in them, do we? This sounds more like 2 elementary schools worth of kids to me, and potentially some impact on our middle and high schools
Yeah.
as well, and
Yeah, it could be. I mean, the build-out for Erie will be 900 students in that area under their current planning. 300 exists, so there's 600 still remaining that could come. 300 are going to Lafayette Elementary, and it may be from the comprehensive review, we do start looking at another elementary school site in the area. But one important thing to look at is open enrollment and what kind of the average rates of out enrollment are for a district. And, 900 kids doesn't necessarily mean 900 that will go to that school. Lafayette Elementary is a good example. There's about 900 in their catchment area. Their enrollment's about 575, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that's something to look at very closely.
So what's the effect on our middle and high schools?
Middle and high, there's a better capacity situation in middle and high. Angevine has quite a bit of capacity, but that could change over time. They too do have a very full attendance area, but with the open enrollment and movement, their enrollment isn't quite as near their capacity. And Centaurus has quite a bit of room too. So I think we probably will be able to accommodate mostly at the high school level without any additional stuff, but we will be looking at potentials of K-8s or something along those lines to see if Angevine needs some relief as well.
And I just am going to make a general comment about when you're thinking about where to put schools, it's sometimes more than about just numbers. Schools are really valuable assets to communities. They're a way to build communities. So a community like Erie it might be a value to a community like Erie to have a school in it rather than to continue to send their kids to school in Lafayette. Not that there's anything wrong with our Lafayette schools, but just because people like to be in there, that has some value.
Yeah, and this is a good process for getting school sites, because you get it on the ground floor. You're not reacting after the development's there, and then you have to buy a cornfield or something that doesn't have people around. You're in the middle of where the kids are going to be, and you can minimize busing and so forth.
Turn my light on for me. So, thank you, Glenn. So, full disclosure, this property is, I could throw a rock from my backyard and hit it. Lots of construction going on there. I'm glad to see, I know this was a process that Erie started a long time ago that development needs to help pay for itself. I'm glad to see that by working together with the Erie City government so long ago, we reap some of the rewards, such as good planning efforts where you put a school right where the kids are instead of later somewhere else. You mentioned a couple of things. So one is I wanted to ask the comprehensive planning, and so maybe the timing. Is the district undergoing that now or soon? Is this what kind of process is that, every so often?
Quick.
It's something we look at informally, periodically, part of my job description and so forth. I have a lot of stuff, but we have been asked to look at it by this spring, to have a good idea of what kind of facility needs we might be looking at in the future.
I see Don coming up. Is the,
Just to add, as part of our update of the educational facility master plan, I talked a little bit about assessments our team's doing. So that document will have a demographic section on it. Glenn will be looking at district-wide where growth is anticipated to occur. Do we have the capacity to accommodate that growth and come up with some recommendations? We've got a little bit of a dilemma here because given the projections, we don't have we've got more than one school. We've got partial schools, and so we try to balance that with evaluating the existing capacity and can it accommodate this planned growth? And then how much of that capacity should be located in, like in this situation, on site within the development. So a lot of analysis still yet to occur, but we're on it. We're, I think, scheduled for a work session with the board to talk about really what our timeline is in January with you all as we collect the information and present it and collate it and have a committee review it and offer it up to the board for review as well, so.
Thank you. So I had one other comment, which is related to developers and setting expectations. My neighbors are so excited that they're getting a school, and I keep reminding them that the land is coming and that there's a process to go through first, and that the best way to determine where a school goes isn't a political process, but it's actually going through a needs analysis. So, you know, I know the developer will be out there telling everybody who buys a home in that area, as they told me in 1999, that there would be a school there within months. The expectations in the community get way far ahead of itself, and you know, the kids aren't there yet, but they could be. I know Louisville was concerned with Steel Ranch going in that their schools would get tight, and so, you know, I know you guys do a good job of managing expectations and interacting with the community, and you know, again, I'm just glad to see that, you know, this land, it doesn't come forward with a recommendation for spending money. That part's really nice. Leslie?
Well, and we would also need to pass a bond to get the money to
Right.
build a building. So it's, and that's all of the community, not just Erie voting for that, so lots of steps
It's a few steps
before
in front
getting
of us,
a school there.
All right, so thank you again.
So this will come back as an action item in 2 weeks, Jim.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So our next item is technology policy revisions.
So if you had a chance to take a look at the agenda, we've obviously got quite a lineup here. Andrew will explain the process. Andrew Moore, Chief Information Officer, the work that we've done around these updates on policy and related regulations. So you have a comprehensive set of documents here. And Andrew, if you just maybe visit with them a little bit about the process, and I know you'd be glad to answer questions. This is obviously going to come back, and the next meeting is action as well. So, Andrew?
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. President, board members, Dr. Messenger. Happy to be in front of you tonight to talk about the updates to our IT policies. First, I'm having a technical problem. It appears that my presentation is not coming up. You guys are not seeing it, correct?
We are not seeing it.
All right, so I'm going to switch computers calmly and bring that up. All the information I'm going to present, though, here tonight, you do have in your packets. And what I'm going to do is just focus on the specific changes, get through that pretty quickly, and then allow you guys to ask any questions that you may have. All right. Can you guys see it now? There we go. Okay, so a number of these policies have not been updated since 2001, and so it was a good time to go back as we started to move to the cloud. Google, specifically for email and calendar, was really the prompt that said, let's take a look and make sure that we're doing the right things policy-wise. Working with Melissa, we went back to CASB and we looked for template-type policies. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we also didn't want to do a lot of wordsmithing on documents that were that old if CASB had newer documents, and they did have new documents for everything you're seeing here tonight. Both student and staff policies were updated, and they were taken to BVEA to review before they came to you, and Cabinet has also gone through these for the changes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about student policy changes first. JS policy is the student use of the internet for electronic communications. Once again, we use CASB. We changed just a couple minor things in the CASB policies. The first one is that they specified blocking of pornographic material, weapons building, all those things that we block by our guidelines. They block those at the individual device level. We block it at our internet level. And so we made that change in the policy. We also took out some verbiage that they had about specific staff to student ratios to supervise the kids. That varies depending on the school, depending on the programs that we have. So it's basically void in our version of the policy. The JSR, which is the regulation that goes along with this particular policy, we simplified it way down. It was much longer. We added specific language to reflect the new password requirements. So those are the same password requirements that you're all living with now. Strong passwords, 8 digits long, upper lowercase, special character and numbers. So it's got to be 3 of those 4 items to pass that. We also added verbiage in here about the fact that BVSD doesn't specifically archive email. So if you delete your email, it may be gone immediately, but will be gone no later than 30 days through Google's own policies. And so this was a discussion about not actually implementing pretty expensive archiving software, but really looking at our email as not the permanent storage for policies for any documents that we have. And if it's deleted permanently at that point in time. We made minor corrections, or really typos, in the acknowledgement regarding use of technology. So just like our staff has to acknowledge that they're using their technology and they have to sign off, our students, both at the elementary and secondary level, need to do the same thing. Slightly different policies for the elementary, secondary, but the same intent, so that they say, yes, I understand. All right, moving on to the staff. Same type of change as far as blocking anything that we should not be bringing up at the server level. We also did the password piece. Overrides are something that our staff can do. So we still do block a lot of content, but staff can override that with a special password, and they have to sign off that basically says if they're going to do that, they're doing it for research reasons, and they actually have a legitimate reason to be looking at some of the things we do block. We also removed references to 3 policies that BVSD does not have. And we also added a little bit of verbiage to say that staff is responsible for the equipment that is given to them as part of their employment. So if it's stolen, it's the employee's responsibility to replace it, except in situations where it may be stolen from a school site or on BVSD property. We actually removed the regulation in support of that simply because the language was already in the policy, and it's a way to basically eliminate something that was just repeating what was already in the policy. Electronic communications, all we did was change the name from electronic mail to electronic communications, so just made it broader, but we adopted the CASB policy as is. And then we removed the regulation that was associated with it. Same reason, keep it simple, don't repeat where we didn't have to. And then the last one is the terms of use for staff, and this is where we've got the password requirement and the email retention as well for archiving. And that's pretty much it. Now, I know you have all the policies that you got in your package that were redlined. A lot of reading there if you did go through it, but happy to answer any questions that you may have.
We're gonna have to change on the board our emails our passwords every 90 days.
So my life
You saw what
revolves a
happened the
lot
last time I
around.
changed my password, so.
It's an excellent question, and I answer that question quite frequently now. Either PAC I was in front of with the same question, TAC. I was in front of the Tech Context about an hour ago having the same discussion, and the answer is yes. The security audit that came out was pretty clear about if you really want to protect the sensitive data that we do have, you really should update your policies and procedures. When you get the regular audit results in October, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get dinged in there for not implementing that 90-day policy sooner, because we did know about it last year. And so barring any major change or decisions by probably you guys to say don't do it, it's coming. Now, Dr. Messenger and I have spoken about a strategy to implement, and so we're not going to require 90 days out of the gate. Most likely in January, we will require everybody to change their passwords, but then we won't do it again until August, and then we'll get into it. So that should allow people a little bit of time to kind of ease into that transition.
No, I'm just saying, you saw what happened last time I changed my password.
We have some great tips that we're using for those who are challenged by that, so Jenny will be glad to share those with you, so, and others, so. And I'm going to use them myself, so, yes.
Yeah, and we're in the middle of rolling out basically the Google accounts for our K through fifth graders. So right now, our K through fifth population does not have Google accounts, but especially at the third, fourth, fifth grade level, we have teachers that are saying, we want that. We want to start using the Google environment. Now, K through 5 will not have email, so that'll be shut off. And so the requirement for them is every 180 days, so basically twice a year, because email is really one of our bigger threats of getting hacked into. Yeah, great question.
Lori?
Thanks. I had a question. I think you mentioned that teachers have access to a password that they can override an account. I'm not sure I'm saying this quite right, to allow other information for a student to use.
Correct.
For a valid purpose, and it has to be legitimated one way or another. Who decides that?
Well, it's at the discretion of the teacher at that moment in time. It used to be used a lot because if you remember a year ago, we blocked YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and we have unblocked all of those at the high schools and middle schools. They're still blocked at the elementary school level. When we unblocked it, a lot of the tools, the social media tools, YouTube for videos, they became available. And so it's not used very much at all anymore. But if they do get that block message and they feel they're going to a legitimate site, it's really at the discretion of the teacher to override it.
Thank you.
Well, I would, this is a pretty expansive review and revision, which Andrew and others have been working on. I would just offer that in this interim 2 weeks, if you have specific questions, if you would send them to me, then we'll work it back through Andrew, then we'll push that answer out to everyone just to, help. We can learn this together. If you have questions, I know that that's a lot to look at in a short time and bring it here tonight, but we would want to be sure your questions are answered. And when it comes back before you in 2 weeks, and if you need more time, we'll honor that as well. But I just know this is a pretty significant review. I appreciate Andrew's overview with the PowerPoint to give you a general sense, but feel free if you get into it and just need a little more information and like to get that in a timely fashion, just let us know. We'll make sure that goes out to the full board.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I mean, this looks fairly familiar to anybody in the corporate environment. Probably less flexibility in the corporate environment, so I appreciate the work going into flexibility around our professionals and really putting some tools into their hands to do educationally what they need to and not restrict them too much, but still paying attention to the safety of our students. So bring this back on consent next time. All right.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Last item for tonight is agenda setting, if anyone has any ideas. And otherwise, we can, do I need a motion to adjourn?
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, Lori.
I hope that we have on our agenda time to talk about the CASB resolutions at the next meeting. The delegate assembly is on October 20th. And so I would hope that board members would have a chance to look at those resolutions and see which ones we can support and have, you would advise me to vote.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's good. Jenny?
And along those same lines, I'm sure it's on there, but we do have the legislature will be in session starting in January, and we usually approve the platform sometime
Get it
in the
moving.
fall.
With nothing else, we can be adjourned. Thank you.